This is just unbelievable, because what started as a quiet moment inside the Dodgers clubhouse suddenly turned into something nobody expected to dominate the entire organization, not because of a game-winning hit or a historic pitching performance, but because Shohei Ohtani had done something so simple, so personal, and so unexpected that it completely shifted the emotional tone of an entire franchise in a matter of minutes. 2 photos. That was all it took. 2 photos sent directly to teammates, without warning, without media buildup, without any kind of public announcement, and yet those 2 images became the center of attention faster than any highlight, any trade rumor, or any postseason projection. It started with phones buzzing inside the clubhouse. At first, players thought it was just another group chat notification, something routine, something related to schedules or training. But then someone opened it, and everything changed instantly. The reaction wasn't loud at first. It was silence. That kind of silence that happens when professional athletes, people used to pressure and intensity, suddenly see something that pulls them completely out of competition mode. Then came the smiles. Then came the laughter. Then came the gathering. Players started walking over without saying anything, just holding their phones, showing others what they had just seen. Ohtani had sent photos of his newborn son. Not through an official announcement. Not through media. Not through any kind of structured reveal. Just directly to his teammates, as if sharing something personal with people he trusts every day. And that detail alone changed everything about how the moment was received. This wasn't a superstar making an announcement. This was a teammate sharing his life. Inside the clubhouse, the energy shifted immediately. Players who normally focus on mechanics, scouting reports, and opponent preparation suddenly found themselves laughing, smiling, and reacting like family members. One veteran reportedly leaned back in his chair and just shook his head, saying nothing at first, as if trying to process what he was seeing. Another player kept replaying the images, zooming in, studying them carefully like they were something far more significant than just photos. And in a way, they were. Because Shohei Ohtani is not a player who shares personal moments easily. Everything about him is controlled, intentional, and disciplined. Fans know him as a global superstar, but teammates know him as someone who rarely steps outside of routine. That's why this moment felt different. It wasn't just about the child. It was about access, trust, inclusion. And once that realization hit the clubhouse, the reactions intensified. Players began gathering in small groups, passing phones around, smiling at something that had nothing to do with baseball. Conversations that usually revolve around pitching sequences and batting adjustments suddenly shifted into something entirely different. People started talking about family, about life, about their own children. The clubhouse, normally filled with competitive tension, felt unusually human. Then came the jokes. One player reportedly laughed and said the baby already had more attention than half the league. Another joked that Ohtani had just introduced the most famous rookie in baseball history, even though he hadn't played a single inning yet. The humor wasn't forced. It was natural. It came from genuine happiness. But underneath the laughter, something more serious was forming. Because almost immediately after seeing the photos, players began talking about gifts. It wasn't planned. It wasn't organized. It just happened. Someone mentioned it casually, and suddenly others agreed. The idea spread quickly through the clubhouse like a shared decision no one needed to vote on. They wanted to do something. Something meaningful. Something personal. Something that matched the significance of the moment. And that's when the conversation shifted again. What kind of gift do you give a teammate like Shohei Ohtani in a moment like this? It couldn't be ordinary. It couldn't be random. It had to mean something. Some players suggested keepsakes. Others suggested personalized items. A few veterans insisted that whatever they did should last for years, something that the family could keep long after the season ends. The ideas kept evolving, each one slightly more thoughtful than the last. The excitement wasn't about attention. It was about respect. Inside a professional clubhouse, moments like this are rare. Players are usually focused on performance, contracts, and competition. But every once in a while, something breaks that structure, something reminds everyone that they are human first and athletes second. And this was one of those moments. While the clubhouse was still processing everything, the news began to spread outward. Reporters started noticing the unusual energy. The laughter. The smiles. The lack of tension. Something had clearly happened, but nobody had official details yet. That mystery only made things more interesting. Then came the breakthrough. The photos. Once the media learned what had been shared, the story immediately shifted from internal clubhouse reaction to public curiosity. Fans wanted to see them. Reporters wanted context. But inside the organization, the reaction was still personal, still emotional, still grounded in something far beyond baseball. And then, just when the story felt like it couldn't get any bigger, another detail emerged. The name. The baby's name. At first, it spread quietly. Not officially confirmed in a press release, not announced in a dramatic fashion, but mentioned in conversations, whispered among players, discussed in small groups. And once it reached enough people, the reaction changed again. Because the name carried meaning. It wasn't random. It wasn't generic. It felt intentional. Structured. Almost symbolic. Players who heard it for the first time reportedly paused, as if trying to understand it fully before reacting. Some immediately nodded, saying it made perfect sense for someone like Ohtani. Others asked questions, trying to understand the origin, the inspiration, the deeper significance behind it. And the more it was discussed, the more it felt like the name wasn't just a label, but a reflection of something bigger. Something connected to identity, purpose, and future. But while the clubhouse was processing the emotional side of the moment, another figure was quietly shaping how the story would be interpreted outside the organization. Dave Roberts. When reporters finally asked him about it, his reaction immediately stood out. Because instead of responding with typical managerial language, he paused. He didn't rush into analysis. He didn't focus on baseball. He focused on something else entirely. Shohei Ohtani as a person. Roberts admitted that when he first saw the photos, his reaction wasn't professional. It was reflective. He wasn't thinking about lineup construction or upcoming games. He was thinking about Ohtani's journey. His discipline. His structure. The way every phase of his life seems to unfold with precision. And then he said something that immediately changed the tone of the entire press room. When I first saw it, Roberts said slowly, I thought about Shohei's book. The room went quiet instantly. Because that phrase didn't sound like a metaphor at first. It sounded like a reference. A clue. Something deeper. Reporters leaned forward. Roberts noticed the reaction and slightly smiled, realizing he had just opened a door everyone wanted to walk through. But instead of immediately explaining, he paused again. And that pause made everything more intense. Because what book was he referring to? Was it literal? Was it symbolic? Was it something private known only inside the organization? Inside the clubhouse, players were still celebrating, still talking, still laughing about the photos and the name. But outside, the narrative had already shifted into something more mysterious. And that mystery only deepened when Roberts finally elaborated, carefully choosing his words. He explained that Shohei's book wasn't a physical book. It wasn't something published. It wasn't something written for the public. It was the idea that Ohtani's life has always felt structured like chapters, each one building into the next with purpose, discipline, and quiet intention. Every phase of his career had felt like part of a larger design. Every achievement felt like it belonged in a sequence rather than standing alone. And now, Roberts said, fatherhood felt like the beginning of a new chapter in that structure. A chapter that no one outside could fully define yet. And that explanation only made the story more meaningful. Because it reframed everything. The photos weren't just a personal update, The name wasn't just a detail. The clubhouse reaction wasn't just excitement. It was part of something larger. A transition. A continuation. A new phase in a life already defined by extraordinary structure. But even as Roberts finished speaking, one thing still lingered in the air. He never fully explained what he meant in the beginning. He never clarified why the phrase came to him instantly when he saw the photos. And most importantly, he never finished the thought he started. Because before he could expand further, another reporter asked a question that shifted the entire direction of the conversation again.